Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is the application walkthrough and virtual advising session for the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program 2019-2020. Deadline August 1st, 2018, so just 2 weeks from today. My name is Michelle Belorci, and I'm joined by Mary Rolfe-Feller, my colleague here in the Washington, D.C. office at the Institute of International Education. And today we will be helping you over the next hour navigate the application, the online application platform, as well as answering questions that you submitted earlier preceding today's webinar, as well as questions that come in live. So this session today is really kind of an informal session for you to ask us questions. We know that there's just 2 weeks away from the deadline, and there's a lot of questions related to letters of invitation, letters of reference, project statements, etc. So I'm going to pass it over to Mary Rolfe to give you an idea of how exactly we're going to carry out the webinar.
All right, so like Michelle said, this webinar is going to be mainly question focused. We're here to serve you guys and to help you get through your application. So we're going to breeze through an introduction of the program. We're going to talk a little bit about eligibility factors. We're going to go over the catalog and how to navigate those award opportunities. We'll talk briefly about review criteria, and then we'll do a walkthrough of the application. Since this is going to be a question-focused webinar, though, I would recommend that you look at the first and second recordings of the application walkthrough for some more in-depth information on any of these topics for reference.
Great. So a little background about the Fulbright Scholar Program, the Fulbright program in general. It was established in 1946 at the initiative of Senator Fulbright from Arkansas. And for the past 72 years, the State Department has been working closely with IIE. IIE has been administering the program on behalf of the State Department. The Fulbright program in all of its variations, whether for students, scholars, visiting to the U.S. or going abroad, all aspects of the program, we have been administering this for the past 72 years. And we are this is the flagship program of the State Department, specifically the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So for more information, you can check our website, but it's a wonderful program, one of the most prestigious academic intercultural exchange programs.
All right, so eligibility. I don't want to touch too much on this slide because we have a lot of information on our website, and I'll show you in just a second. But the two biggest important pieces on this slide is that you must be a U.S. citizen to apply for the U.S. Scholar Program. If you are not a U.S. citizen, you'll want to check out the Visiting Scholar Program. The second is that you do not necessarily need to have a PhD degree or a terminal degree to apply for the U.S. Scholar Program. Degree requirements will vary by award, and when we look at the catalog of awards later, we'll tell you more about where to find that information. As far as on our website, if you'd like to look more about eligibility factors that are basic across all of our awards, you'll go to the website on this page right here. So it's Programs, U.S. Scholars, Core, and then Eligibility. And here we have some more in-depth information about those eligibility factors.
Okay, great. So we want to also quickly introduce you to the catalog of awards if you haven't checked it out already. And essentially the key point here is that you can filter for the award that would be the best fit for you. So you can search according to region, country, you can search by discipline, you can also put in filters for grant length, degree requirement, and also letter of invitation. So I encourage you to use those filters to really narrow down the options because there are 473 unique award opportunities in the catalog. So if we can go straight to that right now, awards.cies.org, and we're going to just scroll to click on Search All Awards. And let's just click here on Albania, for example. And what I'd like to quickly point out for those of you that are not so familiar with it is that this award description will be your best friend, okay? So this is really going to guide you in terms of if you're the right profile that they're seeking, if this is going to fit with your schedule, if it offers the grant activity that you would like to do. So you'll notice on the right-hand side a quick overview, the number of grants, the activity, the category, if they're open to early career applicants, and what does that mean? Early career means if you've completed your PhD or terminal degree within the last 5 years, or have at least 5 years of professional work experience in the field. It also gives you all the other information here under the award details, and if we click on award requirements and scroll down, you'll see for the awards that have contact information for the letters of invitation, they will tell you right here in this award requirements tab. So for example, for this award to Albania, there are several different contacts with the local universities. So if you have not been able to procure a letter of invitation, check out the award description to see if the award provides the designated contact to get that letter of invitation. So, and then of course if we can click on the award benefits, this is something very useful. We've had some questions come in about extra research funds for particular research projects or travel trips. I would guide you to the award benefits page for the award that you're applying to. Typically, beyond the stipend, there are very little resources offered other than the relocation allowance, perhaps, or a book and research allowance, as well as dependent tuition allowance. So if it's not listed here in the award benefits, it really won't be provided. So this is exactly what you can anticipate if you are selected for the grant. And finally, the last tab, the country and area overview, is very useful to see overall a little bit of information about the country, some contacts as well locally, and so this is just a wealth of information for you in the award description. Click on all of the tabs, and then last but not least, if we scroll all the way to the top, you'll see the application guidelines as well as the Apply Now button. We've had some people emailing us concerned that they've had, they somehow accessed the wrong link. Perhaps they had an application started in previous years. Be sure that you click on this particular link. This is the valid and updated link. So, and we'll be walking through that with you. So the application guidelines and the instructions and all of that are here for you. I, in fact, have it printed out, the application, the Embark application instructions, and I've taken a printout of all of the questions that have come in. We've had a very strong response in terms of feedback for the questions. So I've got those printouts with me, so you might hear the papers in the background, but we do have those printed out and printouts available. So if you haven't done so already and you're not familiar with the Embark application system, I encourage you, it's a 29-page printout and PDF. You can also just look at the soft copy, and it really goes page by page through the application with images of the screenshots and everything as well.
Okay, so for review criteria, we can also, you'll know that for teaching awards and for research awards, there are different pieces that you'll need to address in your project statement or different documents that you'll need to attach to your application. If you're doing a teaching and research proposal, you'll need to do everything from the teaching columns and everything from the research columns. So I'll show you online where we have some resources on our website that goes into a further deep dive. If you go back to that awards catalog that we had, if you go to the application guidelines, this is just one way to get to this web page. There are many other ways that you'll end up seeing this linked on our website, but you'll see right here that there's a breakdown for teaching awards, and it's got all kinds of guidance on the different things for project statements, CVs, syllabi, all of that. And then you can look at the research award too. Anything that's, again, for the teaching and research awards is going to be a combination of what's under that teaching drop-down and that research drop-down. So be sure, with as long the award description and that catalog of awards is your best friend, this application guideline page is going to be another best friend of yours when going through your application.
Okay, so we've had some questions about what is required to submit a complete application. What are the components? And they're outlined right here. The application form is online, as I mentioned, and the key component in terms of your proposal is the project statement. And that is a 3 to 5 page requirement. So minimum of 3 pages, maximum of 5 pages. You need not include references or citations, footnotes, or endnotes. We really, since it can only be 5 pages maximum, we really want you to devote that space to the project, delineating what you're going to be doing in terms of research, or if it's a teaching project, or if it involves both teaching and research, to devote the time there and discuss why you're applying for a Fulbright, what you plan to do at the host country, why the host country is relevant to the project, the impact, etc. So you'll find all of that in the project statement guidance in the application guidelines. The CV or resume has a maximum page limit of 6. If you're applying for a Distinguished Chair Award, we allow up to 8 pages for that. And then if you are applying for a teaching award or a teaching and research award, we ask that you submit 2 to 3 syllabi for a total of 10 pages, no more than 10 pages. If the award has research involved, we ask that you submit a bibliography of the latest relevant resources and state of research, up to 3 pages maximum. And then we require 3 letters of reference to be submitted by August 1st. The letters of reference are the only component in the application that is kind of external. You do not submit the letters of reference. Those need to be submitted externally on, through the links that your referees are given in the application. And so those do need to be submitted by August 1st. Since they are coming from individuals that are external to your application, please monitor and discuss with them if they've received the link, check back, and you can resubmit the link to them as well. And then depending on the award, there are different language components required depending on the research. If it requires local language proficiency, we ask you to submit an external language proficiency report. That would be in addition to the self-evaluation, which is in the application. So the language proficiency report should come from someone who, let's say if you're based at a university, somebody in that department who teaches the language, and if you are outside of that, then somebody who can attest, who's a professional in that language and works in that capacity, who can provide the language report for you. And then the letter of invitation will be, we have a lot of questions related to that, so I will be going a little more in detail on that. The letter of invitation, depending on the requirement of the award, in the award. So if it is strongly preferred or required, or even if it's optional, you're submitting that directly into the application. The letter should be addressed to you. It's probably going to be a scanned copy or a PDF, and the letter should be addressed to you on the institutional letterhead. And keep in mind that the person who provides the letter of invitation cannot also provide a letter of reference. Okay, so if you are getting a letter of reference from the host as well, it should not be from your collaborator. The collaborator should furnish the letter of invitation. We have other guidelines on that as well in the application guidelines, but that essentially is the letter of invitation. And then if you are coming from different fields in the arts and architecture, writing and journalism, for example, we ask that you submit supplemental materials. There's information in the application guidelines on the file size limits and the number of files you may be allowed to submit. It's a 500 megabyte limit, so it's pretty generous. But again, there are limitations as to how many of each file you can submit in terms of images, pages, etc.
Okay, and you guys have been typing in some really great questions, so I just want to answer a couple of them really quick before we dive into the application review. So some people have been asking, can you add footnotes to your project statement, or should you include citations in your project statement? We're only giving you 3 to 5 pages to basically pour your heart and soul into why you should receive a Fulbright and what your proposal is. So you do not need to include footnotes or citations, and you will not be penalized for that. I know it's kind of contradictory to how academics work in citing your sources. If you would like, you can include relevant sources in your bibliography. So if you happen to cite somebody in your project statement that is also a relevant research topic in your field at the time that you would like to include in your bibliography, that's okay too. But we will not penalize you if you do not include footnotes or citations in your project statement. If you'd like to include them, that's okay too. But don't get too carried away and spend most of your project statement space with citations versus the actual content of your proposal. All right. So, application walkthrough. So what we're going to do is pull up the application for you, and we'll continue to answer some of those questions about referees and letters of invitation and bibliographies with this walkthrough as well. So we've also got a much more in-depth application walkthrough that has already been recorded. And just so you know, this webinar will be recorded and put online, as well as the PowerPoint. So all of these hyperlinks in the presentation aren't just for us, they're for you too, once the webinar is archived online. So we're going to go online. And so there's a lot of different places you can access the application. One of the easiest ways to access the application is by clicking Applicants all the way up here, scrolling down, and hitting this Embark Application button. Now what this will do is open you up to a screen. It'll be a nature screen. There's like a lake on the background, and all you need to do is just use your login information. If you have previously applied through Fulbright before, you should still be able to use that same email address and password, but make sure that you access the application through the links on our website, not any links that you've used in the past, because they'll take you to the wrong application. So what will happen is you'll have all these different, if you've done a previous application, it'll show up. We have all of the different Fulbright programs on this one sample, so that's why you're seeing different things. If you've applied in the past, you'll see this application closed. You want to make sure that it says Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program 1920 application. And so you can access your application in two different ways. You can click your name, which will show up right here. It's hyperlinked. Or you can hit this edit button. Either one is fine. Once you submit your application, this edit button will go away. So if you want to edit if you want to look at your application or access the referee section of your application, click your name. Okay, so we'll click in here.
And I just want to add, while we're talking about accessing the application, we suggest that you use Google Chrome as a browser when you're doing this. We've heard that Internet Explorer is not the best, and perhaps Mozilla Firefox can be finicky at times, and we haven't actually tried Safari. So we recommend Google Chrome. We've had some positive feedback from people using it, and they haven't had any issues. So in terms of web browser, that's our tip. All right, so when you get into the first part of the application, there are some preliminary questions. And so keep in mind the policy about applying for a second or a third Fulbright grant is that there needs to be a 2-year waiting period between the time that you completed a grant in the Scholar Program and the time that you're applying.
And if you have applied to a Fulbright grant in the past but have not been successful in receiving an award, that does not count. That does not make you ineligible. This is only if you received a Fulbright grant, accepted it, and finished the grant to term. You will not be ineligible if you've applied in the past or if you received a Fulbright but didn't end up being able to go on the grant.
Right. And you'll be clicking on Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program. That's for the Teaching and Research Awards. And the other thing, going on, Be sure to always hit the Save and Next button. That'll be your best friend. You don't want to lose any of your data. You're not required to fill this all out in one go. You're more than welcome to start the application, save it, come back to it, and continually work on it. So take your time with it. If you submit too soon or your letter of invitation comes in later, there's no way that you can get back into it, so you'll have to email us. And I would encourage you to email the program staff in the award description. It's the regional staff, okay?
And again, this page is the kind of your tips and tricks, links, resources page within the application. There's nothing you have to do on this page. This is just here to help you. You've got a link to those application guidelines again, which is a good reminder for how many pages your CV can be or what the margin size should be on your project statement. And then you've got the application instructions, which I highly recommend having pulled up or printed out while you go through your application, because a lot of times you can troubleshoot questions that you have about the application with these application instructions instead of emailing into us and having you wait for a response. Okay. The other thing that's great about this application is you can navigate to the different tabs. Okay, so maybe if you're not ready to look at professional profile yet and fill out that section, you can skip down to references or go up to professional profile. Just make sure if you're entering in any information that you hit that Save and Next button at the bottom or you'll lose your information.
Yeah, and it'll automatically log you out after 20 minutes, so it's important to keep clicking on Save. And you will be required to answer all of the questions that have an asterisk. If you don't, it'll pop up as red and indicate that you need to fill that out.
So that what'll happen is in this review section, if you hit submit and you're ready to go, you'll actually have a page pop up that'll show you where all the errors are in your application or where there's incomplete information, which will be helpful in having you figure out where you need to go.
And if let's say you've submitted your application, but the recommenders say that they didn't receive the link or they don't know how to upload their letters of reference, you can still go back and access your application, but you'll only be able to log in to manage your recommenders in the references section. So that left-hand side where it says references, and you can re-enter their email address if it was incorrect, or you could generate the automatic email that'll go to them. The automatic email will come from Embark. The title will be Fulbright Scholar Program, but please be sure your referees check their spam or junk folder if it does not land in their main inbox. So you'll be able to, we require 3 letters of recommendation. We cannot accept more than 3. If you submit more than 3, we will email you and ask you which one to delete. In order to add the 3rd one, the default setting has 2 fields to enter. So just click on the plus sign here. It'll add a 3rd line for you to fill in. And then once your names and emails are in there of your recommenders, please click on Invite Recommenders. If you do not click on Invite Recommenders, they will not receive the email and they will not be able to upload the letter of recommendation for you.
Now, another really great thing is sometimes you guys will email us and say that my referee didn't receive the automated email. A lot of times that's just simply due to a spam or junk folder issue. The email address is going to be coming from Embark. It will not be coming from something that says Fulbright. It'll be coming from Embark at noreply.com. And so you'll want to make sure that if your referee continues having issues with that, to make sure to add the email address to their address book. So that way it won't be clearing out for spam. If the recommender just can't seem to find the email, but they do know that they received it, or you see that it was opened, so they definitely did receive it at some point, you can hit this resend button and it'll trigger the email to be sent again. And you'll get this little pop-up here. Now it's great. You can see the status of your referees as well. You don't have to email us and ask us. It's great that you actually have the authority to be able to manage the referee section on your application. So as you can see, there's an opened button and there's a submitted status as well. There's also a status that just says received or sent. That means that if it says sent, that the referee did receive an email, but that they haven't even clicked on it yet. So you can see the status of them. It is up to the applicants to liaise with their referees to get their references submitted. So your referees should be reaching out to you if they have questions about the deadline or what time it's due that day. If they're having issues uploading their letter, we cannot accept PDF copies, emails, anything that are reference letters. The only reference letters that we can accept are ones that are uploaded through the application system here. And so you'll have to make sure that your referees submit through the Embark system. If you ever need to remove somebody, so say there just continues to be an issue, one easy way to troubleshoot an issue is to remove them and then re-add a person. So we can just hit remove. You'll see that since I removed that third referee, that the plus button becomes active again. If you click on the plus button, it immediately becomes a field that you can fill in. You must have 3 referees to submit an application, and all 3 referees should be addressing different pieces of your application and different pieces about your professional profile. All of that guidance is in that application guidelines page under the referee section. So somebody was asking what precise time is the application due on August 1st. So we will say 11:59 Eastern Standard Time, PM. And one more thing about the referees, but also the applications in general, is that when your referee receives that automated email, there'll be a link that says click here. When they click here, they'll have to enter in some basic information. One piece of information will be a zip code, so they have to enter in an address. For the zip codes throughout the entire application, it has to be the 9-digit zip code for the address. We have a link in the application when you're going through and filling out in your profile how to find, using the U.S. Postal Service, how to find that 9-digit zip code for you. However, if a recommender or somebody that you're referencing in your application lives abroad, other countries don't necessarily have those 9-digit zip codes. So to get around that error that you'll receive, because they will receive an error and they won't be able to submit a reference without a 9-digit zip code, just simply have them add in a bunch of zeros. However many zeros they need before the proper zip code, just to satisfy and fill in the fields. And then you shouldn't have any issues with submission, and your referees shouldn't as well. So it's the 9-digit zip code of their work university or their home. It'll have guidance in the application when they pull up their referee file. It'll say whether or not they're requesting work or home information. The applicants aren't notified, again, of the deadline, and they're not notified of when their deadline is, which is the same as the application deadline. So be sure to inform your recommenders that August 1st, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is the due date for them as well. So another part that I think is really important in the application is down here in the additional uploads section. So additional uploads is going to include where you need to add a bibliography if you're doing a research or a teaching and research grant. Again, we've, for your convenience, added in some of the guidelines for you. So that way you can have that extra reminder before adding in that attachment. So it's really simple. All you have to do is just click here, it'll say upload file. Right now we do have in a file, but what you can do if you ever need to download something out of your application before you submit is hit this little arrow and it'll download the document. If you need to delete it, just hit the delete button and then you can upload a different document. Syllabi, same exact thing. Now down here, letter of invitation, same idea as far as uploading a file and then submitting your application. Now, a lot of applicants may receive a letter of invitation after they have submitted their application. That letter of invitation is okay to receive after your application is submitted. However, if you have submitted your application, you do not have access to upload a letter of invitation to your application. That's okay. What you need to do then is email the program staff for the region that you've applied to. You'll find that information on our website if you haven't already been in contact with program staff, right here under Contact Us. And if you look right here, you'll see all the different regions. So if you're applying to Panama, you'll want to email WestTIM. If you're applying to East Asia Pacific, to Japan, you'll want to email this email address. And just send us a PDF copy. Please, a PDF, not a Word doc, not a JPEG. PDFs are the best. Send us a copy, and we will upload it to your application after you've submitted. We do allow letters of invitation to be added after the deadline. However, we do ask that you keep program staff involved and in the loop with the status of your letter of invitation, especially if a letter of invitation is required for an award, because we don't want you to be ineligible just because that letter of invitation hasn't come in time, especially if you know that it's going to come in tomorrow or within a week. Then we can try to work with you as best as possible to make sure your application is complete. Somebody was saying, I have multiple letters of invitation, 3 already, possibly more. So it's possible that you can submit multiple letters of invitation. The application system only allows for 1 attachment. So what you'll have to do is merge those letters of invitation into 1 document and upload 1 singular file with multiple letters of invitation. The same goes for if you received a letter of invitation in Spanish, maybe. Letters of invitation should also be in English because there's no guarantee that all of the application reviewers may know whatever language they've written it in. And so there should also be a translation document provided. It doesn't need to be something officially translated with a stamp. It could be something that you've roughly translated if you're fluent in the language. Let's see. So let's look through your questions, or we'll have Michelle maybe answer some of the questions that you guys have written in as well.
Yeah, so I've been trying to get to some of them that are coming in live. I think Mary Rolfe just went over the uploads. We had a question, where do I submit the syllabi? So I hope you were able to hear the answer there. It would be in the additional uploads, and you'll see that information here. We've been getting a lot of questions. Does that mean a maximum of 10 pages for all 3 syllabi if I'm submitting 2 or 3 syllabi? Yes. So since the maximum page limit for the syllabi is 10 pages, if you're submitting 3, they can, you might want to make them 2 to 3 pages each so that you fit that in. So just narrow the syllabi down to the most important information that the review committee needs to see. I've often seen, syllabi uploaded that have all of the information that would be typical for a U.S. university, such as the attendance, or all of that. It's not required if it's going to take too much time, or if there's a tardy policy. We just really need to see the content of what course you're going to be teaching, how you're going to measure success, how you're going to evaluate students, etc. So I would delete any extraneous information that is not relevant to the host or the host country. And we had a question, and it's a good question, who makes up the review committees? Who's going to be looking at our application? So we have various stages to the review. As you know, August 1st is the deadline. We then conduct a technical review for eligibility and completeness during the month of August, and in September through November is when the review committees convene. There will be two separate committees that view the applications in the United States. The first committee is the Discipline Review Committee, and so depending on what box you tick in the application, if you tick the box American History, then colleagues in American History who have PhDs and experience in that will be reviewing your application for academic merit, feasibility, etc. The second committee, those convene specifically in Washington, D.C. They are usually made up of alumni, former grantees of the program who've gone to that country or the region that you're proposing to go to. And so they've been on the ground, they know what's feasible, they know what's suitable, they know what projects are sensitive, and going to be successes. And they also they come from a variety of backgrounds. So that's why it's important that your project statement speak not only to the specialist, but to the generalist, the layperson as well. Finally, at the end of those peer review committees, the application is either recommended or not recommended for final review by the Fulbright binational commissions abroad, or if there's not a commission in that country, so usually smaller countries that don't have a large program, they are administered by the U.S. embassies, the public affairs section, or the cultural affairs section officers will be reviewing your applications and making the final decision. We do not receive any feedback from the commissions or the embassies on their final selection. We don't get any feedback as to why they've selected one application or the other. They do not share any details with us. So if your application is forwarded for the final in-country review, and if you are not selected, we are not able to provide any feedback. If, however, your application is not recommended at the U.S. stage, at the peer review, we can certainly go back in and go through the review criteria and look at your project statement and see what was not presented in a strong way, or how you can strengthen the weaker elements in the application. But if it was forwarded at the peer review stage, that means it was considered a strong enough application to be reviewed by the in-country review committee at the commission. Okay, so that is a snapshot into how the applications are reviewed. At each step of the way, we provide an update. So after the technical review, you'll get just a brief email, one line saying, thank you for submitting your application. That means it's complete. And then it'll go on to the discipline and peer committees. If you are selected, you will get an email updating you that you have been, that your application is moving on in the process. That's usually at the end of November or early December. If you are not selected, you'll be getting that email at the same time as well. After that, the in-country commission and embassy reviews take place, and notifications, final notifications of either selection or non-selection will be starting out. Here we've got the graphic starting in February and as late as May. So it really depends. If you say, well, what does that mean, February through May? It means each country works on a different timeline, and so one country might be all done with their reviews, and they might send us the information in February saying, look, we've selected these people, and then these are the non-selects. So some countries work faster, and they get them done in February. Others trickle through, and some of them only complete them in May. So up until that time, you will be waiting for your final notification. And then May and June, you'll be receiving more information about, filling out the medical forms and all the grantee information that we collect. And then depending on the country that you're going to, if you're selected, we hold pre-departure orientations in June and July for countries that do not have the in-country orientation.
Okay. So some great questions just about the different attachments and components of an application that we've gotten. Somebody was asking about language fluency and the language reports and whether or not you need to submit a language proficiency report. If you are fluent in a language and all of your previous scholarship shows and proves your experience in the field, you can submit a self-evaluation. So there's an option when you go into the application to select a self-evaluation versus an external evaluation right here. And you can complete that instead of having an external referee. So right here. Okay. Another question we had is about letters of invitation and who should be writing them or who they should be addressed to. So your application is going to be read by, like Michelle was talking about, quite a few different people. So it's okay to not have the letter of invitation written to one specific person. You can either have a letter of invitation addressed to yourself, or a letter of invitation can be written to somebody just kind of pretty general, like Fulbright Scholar Review Committee or something like that. It's not something that your application is going to be looked on poorly if you have a specific name addressed in your application or not in that letter of invitation. Somebody was also asking who should write the letter of invitation. So the people that you're collaborating with most closely should be writing your letter of invitation. And then whoever else needs to kind of sign off on it from the university or the institution can also sign the letter if needed. As far as if you're receiving multiple letters of invitation, you should indicate in your application who your primary collaborator is. You know, if there's an award that says you can choose an affiliation, however, ultimately the U.S. Embassy or Fulbright Commission will place you, then that's one of those scenarios where you can likely submit 2 letters of invitation from different hosts just to show your flexibility. However, I would center your project around one of those hosts. Let's see. So we've got somebody asking about how to develop contacts abroad or how to reach out to people. Is it too late to reach out for a letter of invitation? It's still worth a shot to reach out to awards with a letter of invitation, especially if there is a contact listed in the award description, like we were showing earlier in that catalog of awards. If there's an U.S. Embassy contact or a direct university contact listed, definitely try sending them a message and seeing if they respond. If you don't receive any contact from anyone, or the outlook is kind of grim and you're not seeing that a letter of invitation is going to be received, and the award does require a letter of invitation, then it might be time to look at other awards in the catalog where a letter of invitation isn't required. So maybe it's optional, maybe it's preferred, different criteria like that. Let's see. So how flexible is the minimum length of the total grant? So you will have to look at the specific grant details for each country. So we can go back to the catalog of awards. So go to the home page. Another place to access the catalog of awards is right here under Browse the Awards Catalog. If you go to our home page, you also have this really great timeline reminder, which sometimes freaks me out, but it's also a great reminder that to go on and get your application in as soon as possible. Right? So Browse the Awards Catalog, and then we'll hit Search All Awards again. We'll click on Albania since it's the first one. Now if we scroll down, grant length. This one is 4 to 5 months. That is a hard 4 to 5 months. You cannot propose a project outside of that 4 to 5 months, potentially unless you are doing flex, and then you need to look at the flex criteria. So this one is saying that you can do a 4 to 6 month grant if you're flexing the grant. Grant dates are typically a pretty concrete date as well, unless there is an award description that says project proposals outside of this timeline may be considered. If you are ever applying to an award and it says something like that, you must check with program staff and the Fulbright commissions, the U.S. embassies, before you apply. You should always have that information okayed, checked through, approved before you apply. Don't just assume that because it says grant dates may occur outside of what is already listed, that yours will be approved. So please write into us if you're looking to propose something that's outside of those dates. Okay. Let's see. So if your letter of invitation does arrive late, if you're expecting it to come a week after the deadline or even just a day after the deadline, just be sure to keep program staff in the loop. Let us know, and we'll be able to give you some more deadlines after the deadline, the official August 1st deadline, concerning when we have to, at the very last minute, get that letter of invitation from you. Try, if at all possible, to get it submitted or sent in as close to August 1st, but we do understand that you're working at the mercy of some other people as well, and that they're in different time zones and different vacation starts of the year, things like that. So we'll try to work with you as well.
Okay, so we've been getting some questions about IRB approval. So if, just to let you know, we do not require that in the application, but we do, the onus is on you to get that before the grant starts if you are selected. So if you're not sure about having IRB approval from your home institution at this point by the August 1st deadline, not to worry. You need to have that in place once you go on the grant.
Somebody was asking about eligible external language evaluators and where to find them. If you're affiliated with a university, asking somebody within the foreign language department could be a good resource. Anybody local in your area, anybody that's really qualified to assess the language that you need to prove your language evaluation for. If it is a very niche language or not widely spoken or something that's not taught at a university, anybody that happens to be a native could be a good resource as well. So the application deadline for the Fulbright Scholar Program is August 1st. However, if you're looking to apply for the 2020-2021 academic year, then the application deadline will be August 1st next year of 2019. So if you don't apply this year, you will apply next year in August. The application deadline for the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program is always going to be August 1st.
Okay, so we were getting some questions about are PhD candidates eligible to apply? And if you are currently in your degree program getting your PhD or your terminal degree, you must have the degree awarded by February 1st, 2019. That means before the grant would take place. If you are working on your PhD and are looking for funding to conduct field work, then I recommend the Fulbright Student Program, which provides funding and research and study grants up until the dissertation level of the PhD. So if you're not getting your PhD before February 1st of next year, then either wait until you do to apply for the Scholar Program or look to the Fulbright Student Program for possible grants.
So some more letters of invitation questions that we've gotten in, which is great. You guys have some really great questions today. Somebody says, must the letter of invitation refer to a Fulbright grant? Yes, the letter of invitation should speak directly to who you are, their interest in you, but also what your grant activity will be and the role that you will play as a Fulbrighter on their campus or at their institution. It should include the program dates that you'll be there. It can be, as general as the months. It doesn't have to be, on July 18th you will start. It can just say they'll start in July, they'll end in September or something like that. If you look in the awards catalog and you have the fortune of the invitation requirement section saying a letter of invitation should not be sought, then you're in luck. You don't need to do anything with a letter of invitation. You should not be including a letter of invitation. If you do include a letter of invitation in your application, we will delete it. So don't bother with going through the effort. Spend more time on that project statement instead.
Okay, we've been getting some questions about the teaching and research ratio and how much time to devote to each activity in the project statement. That's a good question, and that will really depend on a couple of things. Number one, does the award description outline what the ratio should be? Don't assume that it's an automatic 50-50. There's an award to Nepal, for example, that's a teaching and research grant that is 80% teaching and 20% research, and that is clearly listed in the award description. If it is not listed, if it says the applicant should determine the ratio, that's great. That means it's up to you, and depending on what your research project requires, that'll probably influence what percentage you can devote to teaching. So there's not any specific parameter for how many courses you should teach or what that should look like, but if you are going for 50-50, I would assume that it would be at least one course. The teaching-only grants are usually 2 or 3 courses. So if you're combining it with research and you're able to do more than one course, you can mention that. But if you're only able to teach one course and you need to devote the rest of the time to research, you need to clearly outline that in the project statement, listing what course you plan to teach if you've already discussed that with the host institution. And ideally, in the course syllabi that you provide, one of the syllabi would be tailored specifically for the course that you propose in the grant. And then the other one, if you're submitting just 2, the other one can be something that you've used in the past and demonstrating that one of your successful classes that you've taught. So keep in mind the teaching and research will depend A, on the award if it's already outlined what ratio, or B, if it's not listed the ratio, that's up to you.
So somebody was asking if language proficiency is not required, does it still help your application? If you are going to a country that speaks Spanish and, so for example in Spain maybe, technically for teaching it's not requiring Spanish maybe, but you do still have a knowledge of Spanish, that's fine to submit that language evaluation. If you are going maybe to Germany and you're saying that you're fluent in Spanish but you're doing a project on business administration, it's probably not going to be that relevant to your project, and so it's not necessary to include it. Your application doesn't need to be a whole biography of your life. It just needs to show your ability and your qualifications for the proposal that you are writing for that project.
Okay, somebody asked about the list of institutions that have worked with prior Fulbright scholars. If, let's say, you're still determining what your host location could be. So we have a great resource on our website. If you go to the main page, the CIES page, we have what's called the Fulbright Scholar Directory. And so let's just go to the Fulbright Scholar page, go to the home, and you'll scroll down about midway, and you'll see the Scholar Directory. Now this is a listing for the past 9 years, I believe, 8-9 years, and it will list all of the grantees in the U.S. Scholar Program, and you can search by country. So if we go to the advanced and we just click on Albania, for example, since we're using that as a sample here, you click there and you'll be able to see where scholars have been hosted. And if you click on their name on the left side, you'll also be able to see what project they did. You can also search by discipline. So let's say, for example, you haven't selected a country yet, but you are in the field of communications or journalism. You can see where scholars have gone globally. So the Scholar Directory is a great resource, and you can see the list of disciplines here as well. You can also search for specializations. And speaking of, now that we're on disciplines and specializations, we had a question, what if my discipline is not listed in the drop-down menu in the application? That's fine, then you can select other, and in that extra field you would need to specify what that is. The reason why we ask this is, again, to place you in the appropriate discipline review committee. So your peers from your discipline will be reviewing your application, so we need to make sure that you are in the correct committee for review. All right, so a lot of questions coming in. Hope we're getting to a lot of them.
Somebody was asking, can you affiliate with somebody outside of a university? Depending on the award, it may be possible to affiliate with a museum, with strictly a research institution, with an NGO. All of that could be possible, but is not necessarily an option, but it'll depend on the award. So if you go, for example, Ukraine is one, there's a specific award that allows you, and it says so in the award description, to affiliate with NGOs or something like that. And I'll pull that up for you. If you are not sure if you can affiliate with an outside institution, it's a good idea to email the program staff and see if that's going to be possible. So you'll see with this Cultural Resource Management Award, it has further information. If you keep scrolling down, and it'll say any appropriate institution accredited by the Ministry of Education and Science. You can also look in the award requirements section for any further information. This one is saying right here, it has a list of universities, but also saying state agencies, museums, NGOs, and other cultural organizations are possible. I would recommend, if you ever are looking for an affiliation outside of a university, to reach out to us and we can have it cleared for you beforehand.
Okay, so we're down to the last few minutes before hitting the 3 o'clock hour. We'll take a few more questions, and I think we've hit a lot of them so far. Let's see. What else have we got? One question was, is prior travel to the country important? It's not necessary, that's for sure. There will be some awards that may prefer applicants who haven't had recent extensive experience in the country. They might not prioritize your project if you go there regularly and if you already teach and research there, but having prior experience in the country is typically not required. So
one person is asking a question about if the award says, quote, language fluency sufficient to complete the research project is required, end quote. Is it up to you to decide? You'll find that phrasing in a lot of awards for Europe. And what that means is that it is dependent on the nature of your proposal, whether or not you need fluency. Are you an anthropologist that is going to be going to local remote villages and interviewing town elders and have no knowledge of Macedonian whatsoever? Then we need to see in your project statement how you're going to circumvent that issue. Are you going to hire a translator? Is your team that you're working with at a research institution fluent? Is the university completely taught in English and functions in English? Anything like that, then it is up to you to show and demonstrate how you're going to combat language proficiency in your project statement, if it states that. All right, somebody was asking, is it possible for somebody to review the application prior to it being sent in? So occasionally we do have availability to review project statements. However, this close to the deadline, we are receiving a huge influx of inquiries each day, and so it becomes more difficult for us to devote time to reviewing application proposals. So I would recommend instead right now, because we want you to be able to get the best and complete reviews as possible in a timely manner, is to actually look towards your colleagues and other people at your institutions for that proofreading. Follow the application guidelines as closely as possible. Color code your project statement if you need to during proofreading. Color code it for each application guideline that we require and each project statement question that you need to answer, and to help you better better make sure and better proofread that statement.
All right.
Somebody was asking about if I have an interdisciplinary award or a cross-discipline project. Where do I go? What does that mean for me? If you are proposing a interdisciplinary project, that's okay. What you will need to do, though, for us to be able to put you into the best discipline committee is in your project, in your application, when you're selecting a discipline that you kind of most identify with, pick one that you most identify with. You know, if you're proposing an American Studies project, but maybe it's actually more so American literature, then go for that. If you're doing something that could be completely off the wall, like teaching STEM, and so it's kind of half science, half education, which side are you looking at it from more? Are you approaching it as from that education side of things, or are you approaching it because you're doing critical analyses and you know, you're using test tubes and chemistry all day? Is that side of STEM? So choose what you best feel like you identify with for discipline.
Okay, we had a question about listing the 5 outstanding professional achievements. It should not be a narrative. It can just be, think of it as 5 bullet points. And I believe that particular section has a limit of that you are required to hit a double space, I believe, or hit the space bar. So follow that very clearly to the T in terms of the instructions on how you enter those 5 achievements. If you skip a line or if you try and indent, it will cut off. We just have exactly 5 lines in that system. So be sure to follow up on that. And in terms of the abstract, the project summary, that also has a strict 700 character limit. So that includes spaces. Of course, every letter and punctuation is considered a character. So 700 character limit for the project summary, also known as abstract.
Okay. Somebody was asking about the breakdown of teaching versus research awards and the teaching ratios. Their ratios, unless they're listed in the award description, should be something that you come to terms with in collaboration with your proposed host. So if your host is expecting you to teach 2 classes and have that 50-50 split, then that's something that you'll want to add into your project statement. If it's something where you're more interested in a 70-30 split, then that's something that you can also do, unless otherwise stated in the award description. Somebody was asking if we are willing to start to learn a language once we are accepted for an award or awarded something, is that something we should add to the project statement? So if you don't currently have fluency or proficiency in a language, should your willingness to learn that be included in your project statement? That's okay to include. A lot of people, some people will include it because they feel that that's immediately a way of them showing that they're trying to get involved with their host community and learn some of that basic knowledge. Some people write in their project statements, I've already downloaded Duolingo and I've started just learning the basics, so that way I'll be able to get around. I think that's a great way that you can show initiative, but it's not required either. However, if you're looking if you're looking at a project that does require fluency in a language and you don't currently have it, then we're going to be judging your application based on the application that you present at that time, not on what we think you might be able to gain before your grant. And so if it's required and you don't have it at that time, then likely you won't be a competitive applicant or you will be ineligible.
Okay. So it's a little after 3. We could probably take, we see a lot of you still are here. with us in this webinar so we can take a couple more questions. And keep in mind, if you have any specific questions pertaining to the country, the host, the award, not necessarily the application itself, please reach out to the regional team that looks after the award. Look at the award description and see if there's any information there. If you have any questions specific about that, we're not taking them at the time here.
One great question is just about the application and the state of it at your submission. So like Michelle had said earlier, is you'll submit your application by August 1st. Ideally, all of your information will be submitted by August 1st. And then what will happen is that technical review phase where Michelle and I and our other colleagues will be reviewing your application for completeness. If we notice anything in your application is off, you have too many pages in your CV, your project statement upload is actually completely blank, you're missing referees, then we're going to email you and ask you for you to amend your CV or to give us that copy of your project statement so we can add it. Or we're going to ask you to reach out to your references and make sure that they submit. So there's that little bit of grace period during technical review where we will be reaching out to you if we notice anything is obviously wrong with your application. However, try to have that application as complete as possible. You will not be immediately disqualified on August 2nd if you do not have all 3 letters of reference submitted. However, during that technical review phase over the weeks following August 1st is when we'll be reaching out to you and contacting you about any missteps in your application.
Okay, so we've been getting some questions about how many applications we receive and how many grants are given. So that information actually we are not able to share due to the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board policy. Keep in mind, though, there are about 473 awards available every year, and of those 473, they offer about 800 grants. So one award might have up to 5 grants. So that means one award could send potentially 5 U.S. scholars or professionals to that country. So it's important to select the right award. You can only apply for 1 award per competition, and so you really do need to narrow your options down and find the award that is the best fit for your profile and what you propose to do in that country.
Okay. Somebody was asking about the start dates of grants. So if an award lists that the host can say you can either start in October or January so that you have a choice of semester, be sure to indicate in your project statement which semester that you are looking to participate on. It's good to demonstrate flexibility in a project statement, but that should be concerned with demonstrate your flexibility through your cultural aptness. So what are you going to do if you get overseas and you find out that you don't have the resources necessarily that you need? How are you going to adapt your project to suit the needs of what you do have available? You don't necessarily need to demonstrate flexibility by saying that I would like to start either in January or October, that you're open in that way. You should give a specific detail as far as grant dates and grant lengths are concerned. Somebody was saying, should my project statement is in the 3rd person, should it be in the 1st? Typically, the project statements that I've seen are written in 1st person because the people are talking about themselves. There's no right or wrong answer necessarily with that. So whatever you're most comfortable with, I would say, then write it that way.
We had a question about the flex option. And if you're unsure whether that's optional or eligible for you, please take a look at the award details. Here we can see the flex option for this grant is not available. Flex is something that is allows you to visit the country in, with more than one visit, so to be able to conduct your research, typically research, but some awards are open to teaching as well for the flex option, over 2 academic years, and to have 2 or 3 segments where you're there in the country. So if you opt for the flex option, if it's eligible in the award description, you do need to mention why you need the flex option, give some justification, and also provide a timeline as to when and for how long you will be in the country, and when those segments will take place. Please note that there are distinct parameters for the flex. So, for example, if a country has a grant that's open for 4 months to a maximum of 9 months, the flex option, for example, might only allow you to spend 4 to 6 months. So please take a look at the flex parameters. They are not usually the same as the non-flex parameters.
Okay. There are a couple people that were asking questions about whether they need to select who their collaborators are or whether or not the country will select who they will collaborate with. In general, if you're proposing a project, you should list who you'd like to collaborate with or who you're expecting to collaborate with. There will be some countries that in the award description will say, you may propose who you'd like to collaborate with. However, the U.S. Embassy or the Fulbright Commission may place you in a different location, so flexibility is preferred. In that case, it's still good to present a detailed project where you're showing, I picked this university for these reasons, they have this resource, these scholars are doing this type of project, versus having something that doesn't look like you've done as much homework, where you're just saying, yeah, sure, I'll go to India, that's fine, but not really do any legwork as far as, well, these are the people that are doing the topics that I'm interested in, and this is how I can contribute to this university. You want to add those details in because it looks like you have already invested in the project before you've even gotten started. Somebody was asking, do I need to, for the syllabi, do I need to create new syllabi or can I use ones from previous courses? Yes, you can use courses from previous syllabi. There are a handful of awards in the catalog of awards that will ask you to create syllabi around the award. However, in general, we're just looking for your teaching style and your teaching philosophy within the syllabi. We're looking to see, are you text heavy? Are you group project oriented? How do you like to construct your classes? Okay. Somebody was asking about if I apply for a certain length of award and then I'm selected and either have more time available or less time available, how is that going to affect me? It's possible that they may be able to edit your grant dates. Once you're selected, all of that will be hammered out in the grant document phase of things. If you expect any changes, it's great to be in contact with us and keep us up in the loop with anything like that. So with letters of reference, there are guidelines for referees for what they should be covering. As far as if you're proposing a teaching proposal, they should cover, it should be either some kind of supervisor that can speak to your qualifications as far as teaching. We've got these tips right here. We've got who may serve as a referee. If you're a PhD candidate at the time, but you will have received your doctorate by February 1st, then we'll have to receive a letter of recommendation from your doctoral thesis advisor, something like that.
Okay, so I think we'll just take one final question and then we'll log off. And if we haven't gotten to your question and it's very urgent and important, again, please email the program staff responsible for the award. So we had a question: how can we speak to the cultural ambassador role and why we're applying for a Fulbright grant? So that's a great question, and we certainly hope to see mention of that somewhere in your project statement. We understand that there are several grant agencies out there. This is a unique opportunity that is offered by the United States government through the State Department as the flagship program of intercultural exchange, connecting academics and professionals abroad. And so we really hope to see your interest in that. For example, I got a call last year from a potential applicant that was interested in just going to the country, collecting some samples, going into the field, collecting the data, and coming back. The person was not necessarily interested in being affiliated with a host, didn't really need to collaborate with anyone in that country, but just needed the funding to go collect the data and come back. So that is not what we're hoping to see in your application. We are hoping to see the demonstrated interest in collaborating with your local partners, whether they're researchers, artists, academics at the university, connecting with students in the classroom, serving as a cultural ambassador from the U.S. to that country, understanding what that means in terms of having exposure as a Fulbright scholar, going to and providing different talks. Even if you're just doing a research project, we always encourage our scholars to engage with the community at large. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of being the ambassador, kind of that cultural diplomacy and really bridging, and having some cross-cultural connections that are beyond just the research or the teaching you're doing in the classroom. So on that note, I'm going to thank you for joining and for attending this webinar. We hope it was helpful and informative. We understand that the deadline is 2 weeks away. There's a lot to get done, but the website, as you see, is very helpful and informative. It has lots of resources. It's quite vast. So we're here to help. So we want to thank you for attending. We want to wish you all the best, and we look forward to receiving your application on August 1st.
Thanks, guys. Happy applying.
Bye-bye.